So I wanted to talk about, we should talk about meditation, where all that fits in, you know. We all have all these weird ideas, I think, about what Buddhism is, what meditation is. We get so confused, you know. So first of all, the word meditate, you're allowed to have your own definition. You can think what you like. You can think what you like meditation means. You don't have to have Buddha's view. But if you want to understand Buddhism, you better have his view. Isn't it? It's obvious. So what's fascinating, it completely throws us, is when you hear the Tibetan word for the verb to meditate. And it's the verb to familiarize. It completely throws us. What does that mean? Well, it's even more simple. It's like called to learn. But familiarize, you think, well, familiarize what? With what? Well, guess what? To meditate means to familiarize your mind with two things. That which is true and that which is virtuous. That's it. That which is true and that which is virtuous. So you can, as you can see, we can approach Buddhism from either angle. It's a complete path of morality, if you want to see it from that point of view, and it's a path of wisdom, it's from that point of view. It's about what exists. And what's interesting for the Buddha, these two completely coincide. In other words, Buddha's view is this. The extent to which our minds are caught up in nonsense, delusions that cause things to appear in a ridiculous way. In other words, the extent to which our minds are caught up in believing in things that don't exist, which is called ignorance, is the extent to which we suffer. So therefore, the method for getting rid of suffering, two things. The extent to which our minds are caught up in misery and delusions, which is meaning fantasies, is the extent to which two things, the extent to which we act non-virtuously, and therefore the extent to which we suffer. So Buddha's method is in order to get happy, you need to practice virtue, which comes from bringing your mind into sync with that which does exist. So wisdom brings happiness wisdom brings happiness. Ignorance brings suffering. It's the way of saying it. So familiarizing your mind with that which is true, or the wisdom business, and with virtue, that's what being a Buddhist is. And that's what meditation actually means. So that throws us. So because we have this vague notion that it's something mystical you do when you close your eyes. Most people are totally convinced it's all about whatever mindfulness means, whatever you think mindfulness is. It's all about getting rid of thoughts. There's really very bizarre views about what it is, you know. Well, there are two kinds of formal meditation techniques in Buddhism. Millions of techniques, but that come out of two headings. One kind, the first one, the crucial one, which came from the Hindus, is the one that's broadly known as mindfulness, which is a very loose way of using that word. You know, it encompasses lots of things. Better to call it single point, it's concentration. It's a technique, a psychological technique that enables you to get to a very subtle, more refined level of your mind where it can be super focused because it's unencumbered by all the chatting rubbish. You've learned to subdue the grosser level of conceptuality and access a subtler, more refined level, eventually a non-conceptual level, which is a bit abstract for us. So we've got to have this concentration. It's utterly necessary in order to achieve the result of removing the delusions from your mind and being in sync with wisdom and developing virtue and goodness and becoming a Buddha. It's a necessary technique. We can't do it without it in the long term. So the thing is with the Hindus, this technique was so phenomenal, so stunning, the results of it so remarkable. It's what they call samadhi. They actually, equate it with liberation. Because the results for a person who has accomplished this single point of concentration are quite stunning. Utterly blissful, utterly radiant, beyond gross conceptual nonsense thoughts. A person who's gone into this state can stay in that for eons, they say. This is a type of rebirth, actually, called a formless realm, where the mind is utterly absorbed. They say that this samadhi is the result, the goal. You get clairvoyance from this, you get incredible qualities. But for the Buddha, it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning, getting this single point of concentration. And all the benefits are just like byproducts, All the lamas will wax lyrical. I remember Lama Yeshe, when he taught us the 6 yogas of Naropa, he waxed lyrical about the benefits of single point of concentration. The body feels like absolutely blissful. This is stunning to us. Your thoughts are absolutely effortlessly under your control. Every thought you can control. There's nothing conceivable like that in our culture. Nothing remotely similar. We just assume that the mind is chaos, and we even mystify it and romanticize it. You know, this berserk, insane asylum in here. We can sort it all out, get it focused, and completely subdue the delusions. But that's the way to go. We've had that countless lives, Buddha says. Not enough. You've got to use this single-pointedness. Because thinking like this is sort of like you've accessed the microscope of your mind, where it's super clear, super efficient, super capable to do really stunning, sophisticated, in the second mode of meditation, analysis, in order to argue with ego's misconceptions, in order to see the truth, in order to realize emptiness, in order to cut the root of samsara. So the second mode of meditation, each of the types of meditation is labelled in terms of its result. So the first one's called single point of concentration, or the term, it's a translation, I suppose, of the Pali or the Tibetan or something. It's called calm abiding. Calm abiding. Sometimes you see it's referred to as mental quiescence. Terms we don't use in daily life. So, of course, because of that, we mystify it. And again, I find in many other languages there's no proper term for this. It's seen as this weird, strange, arcane phrases that are used for it, which, of course, makes us mystified. It's something weird, you know. It's just single point of concentration, but not at a level we can imagine. Beyond conceptual, which we don't think exists. Super subtler level of mind. But not the subtlest. In the Vajrayana, the techniques there enable you to get the mind even more subtle. But nevertheless, this is the Hindu technique which Buddha took with him. And it's the central technique among Buddhists, you know, in order to get the mind to this subtle state. So you can now do the actual job of unpacking, unravelling and deconstructing and ridding the mind of all the rubbish. That's finally the point. That's the point. So this meditation is known in terms of its goal as well as called special insight, vipassana. There's apparently many kinds of vipassana meditations, insight, and one that's most familiar to the world, which is even known as, even organisations are called vipassana, you know. It's a type of meditation that Lord Buddha taught. That's one of the beginning practices where you learn to become familiar with, I've never done it, with the sensations of your body. Right? Something like that, isn't it? You know about it. Tell us. She's an old expert.
No.
She's an ex-Zen practitioner.
Yeah, but we didn't do the 4 foundations of mindfulness.
No, okay, so tell me what vipassana...
I think of body, of sensations, feelings, mental formations, and anyone else know the 4th one? There's 4 foundations.
Okay. So the typical one that's used is the sensations of the body, isn't it?
The breath. I think the...
and the breath.
The
sensation
of the body. I've never been to one of those retreats or anything. No. I think they do the sensations of the body.
So it's one of the earlier practices because we are so embodied. It's a good way to start. So the one that's vipassana, the special insight, the one that's taught in the Mahayana tradition, the tradition we're practicing, is familiarity with the thoughts, not the body. You can do that one. All these techniques are Lord Buddha's. They're marvellous. But the one that's taught here is called special insight. The goal is to get insight into, the special insight is insight into emptiness. Special insight. So this is the point here. What's the method? The method you use to get insight into emptiness, or indeed anything else, you can use it to get insight into karma, all the teachings. You have to use this method. And this method, as we know, for Tibetan Buddhists, is called analytical meditation. Again, that completely throws us. Because first of all, we think meditation is one thing, we think it's not thoughts. And then we think analytical, we kind of get squeeze our brain and get all confused, you know. Because these words are arcane, medieval, if not ancient Indian. So we've got to unpack it and put simple English words to it, simple words that we understand in our contemporary culture. Well, it sounds disappointing, but the better word to use for us to understand analytical meditation is the verb, to think about it. I'm sorry to disappoint you. It means think about it. How do you think we learn anything in our lives? You see, this is what I find beyond fascinating. We in the West are highly sophisticated, technically brilliant minds, actually. You know, most Tibetans in the traditional medieval situation of the monasteries, most Tibetans never knew how to write. They didn't write things. So only the great scholars studied one of the 5 sciences, which was called grammar. And they're the ones who are the poets. But look at us, we're geniuses. Well, maybe not. I mean, I look at people's writing, I'm a bit stunned, like 5th grade, you know. No one knows grammar properly. But we all learn to write things. Everybody's writes, you know, go crazy, all computers and writing. Everything's words. So that's the first point. But the point is this, it's really fascinating, these words. The methods we have used all our lives to learn things are exactly what this method is saying here, but because the words are different, we get confused. So I always use a simple, embarrassing example. I always use the same example. I can use another one, so boring. So I always remember when I first learned 1 + 1 was 2 at school. Okay, Miss Holton. I always remember Miss Holton. I always remember Miss Holton because she smelled beautiful. She had perfume. My mother must have worn perfume, but Miss Holton was just divine, and she had this bright scarlet lipstick. It was about 1949, I suppose. And obviously, she was tall. I was a wee thing, 4, I suppose, 5. And she would sort of hug me. My mother must have hugged me, but I remember really appreciating Miss Holton's hugs. I remember that in her black cloak, you know. Then there were all the nuns who didn't hug you. Anyway, never mind. I remember Miss Holton. Miss Holton taught me that 1 + 1 was 2. Now hear this is the point. I've never heard that before, had I? It was brand new information to me, wasn't it? So I have to, obviously my mother had done her due diligence and Miss Holton was a valid source. You've got to assume she's a valid source for the information. But what she would have done if she was speaking in a Buddhist way, she would have said, Robina, I want you to have this information written down in your book. Get it clear. 1 + 1 is 2. Not 1 + 4, 1 + 3, maybe this, maybe that. Facts. You've got to have your facts. She would have said, now go home, Robina, go to your room, close the door, sit down, get some single point of concentration. When you've got a bit of focus, go to the second mode of meditation and do some analysis of this, please, so that you can develop an insight. That's what she would have said. Well, what would I have done? Well, I didn't do homework because I didn't have my own room. I didn't have a door to close. There were 7 chaotic, crazy children, not enough beds, you know, so I never did homework. But if I had done, I would have got some focus first, because you can't do anything without some focus, can you? You've got to focus your mind. To the extent that you can. I would have done whatever I could. Then I would have gone to the second mode. And what would I have done? I would have to have the proper facts that she gave me. I've got to be certain that the intellectual facts are correct. Intellectual facts. Then I would sit down and I'd use methods, wouldn't I, to help me internalize this information, which I might use my blocks, I might write it down, and at some point what I'm doing is I'm making sense of these words, meaning I'm thinking about them until eventually the penny drops and I'll go, oh, I get it, Mummy. Is that not how we learned everything? Is that not how you've learned mathematics, music, driving, all the genius things that our heads are full of now? We're incredibly brilliant. The things we have learned, you listen to the theory first. You've got to get the theory right. You don't go vaguely, well, just go to a cake, go to the ingredients, flour and eggs, and just got to get all mystical, and, I'll make a cake, it'll come naturally to me. That's how we think of spiritual. I mean, we're completely insane because we so mystify spiritual. Because we assume it's unknown, we assume it's from on high, we assume it's a gift from God, we assume it's a vision, we assume it's a feeling. I mean, it's like beyond ridiculous, you know. Becoming a Buddha is like becoming a violinist or a cook. You get the information first, your facts. You've got to get the words, the theories, the facts, the recipes. You've got to be confident that they are correct already. Then you go home and you think about them until the bloody penny drops. That's how you become a violinist, isn't it? You had not a single thought in your mind about music before you started. You would never have heard of a violin. You wouldn't have known A from Z. But what do? You start with a theory. You go home and you practice it. You familiarize your mind with it until eventually it becomes, as she put it, instinctual. That's all instinct is. If we are, we're good at anger, good at jealousy, good at fear, guess what we've practiced in the past? We've practiced them to perfection. That's what we're trying to do when you learn music. You're completely not familiar with music. So you start with the theories. You go home and you put meat on the bones and it becomes experiential. So don't mystify experience. It's the result of squeezing your brain and familiarizing your head until it drops to the heart and becomes natural. That's how we're good at anger, love, compassion, killing, psychosis, music, or Buddhahood. There isn't a fraction of difference. It's just the words they use are different, so we put it in the sky somewhere and never come down to earth and never understand it. Are we communicating?
Yes. You just you just used the term, you said a number of times the penny drops, but you just said from the head down to the heart.
That's right.
Maybe for the first time.
Huh?
I think I heard you maybe for the first time saying that you've been saying when the penny drops.
Then
you said this
from the
time
head to the
when-
heart. Yes.
from
So
the head
then
to the heart.
you mean you like that one? In other words,
I'm just verifying
that's what it means. Yeah.
Yes.
You start with the head first. You have to learn your theories, don't you?
Yeah.
And you're not sure. Was it 2 eggs? Was it 17 eggs? Oh, it's 2 eggs. Look at the recipe. There's 2, and you do it,
Yeah.
and then slowly you do it spontaneously. I mean, it's not rocket science, people. It's simply developing new habits. That's all. And all we're trying to do is develop the habit of becoming a Buddha, virtuous and true, and seeing reality. There is no difference. There is no difference. Are we communicating here? So don't panic. Don't panic, you know. You go on to study course to become a doctor. You don't panic. You have a series of, have several years to study. You go one step at a time, and you'll get there if you work hard. It's the same with Buddhahood. Except it'll be a few lives, that's all. It's the same principle. But once you've got a map, once you've got a course, you're on a course, okay? And you've got the map, you've got your teachers. You've got to trust those teachers and trust those maps, because it means you've got to check out first, because you're the boss, not them. And then you just bop along, baby. Ticking the boxes as you go along. This is it's the hard work is the perseverance. But most of the time it's like we're confused. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what I know. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know where I'm going. Am I right? Who do I believe? We're always confused. So meditation, 2 kinds. In the long term, in order to really get insight into emptiness, not to mention everything else, you have to access a subtler mind. Because the simple point the Buddha is making is the gross conceptuality is not capable. But we've got to start there, because that's where we're at. And then eventually it becomes internalized to degrees of subtlety and instinctiveness that we can't, comprehend. But it's the same principle as what I said before, So be happy with your progress. Be happy with understanding things first intellectually. And stop greedily saying, well, I sort of know the words, but I can't do it yet. Well, give yourself a break, please. It's not possible to do it yet. Be happy with knowing it intellectually. And they even talk about realizations like this. There's realizations at the level of intellectual. Don't underestimate intellectual. Don't put yourself down because you know the words but don't know the experience yet. You're confused if you think you've got the experience and you only know the words. You're in big trouble then. Like if you think you're a cook, because you know all the recipes. Make me a cake, please. Well, I sort of can't do that. Well, then you'll be chucked out of the cooking class, you know that. So you've got to put your money where your mouth is. But don't be disappointed with knowing only things intellectually. You've got to start somewhere. Be happy with intellectual. But we beat ourselves up. Oh, I don't know. I know all the words, but I still get angry. Yeah, join the club. Come on, people. It takes time. I mean, it's like you start to play piano, then you kill yourself because you can't play Bach yet. Or you hop on the bike. Oh, Mummy, I tried to ride a bike, but I can't do it. I fell off. I heard a person say, I tried to meditate yesterday and it didn't work. They said it. Excuse me. Ridiculous. So the point is this. What you have to develop insight into, that means the meaning of the words. There is nothing cosmic in here that's secret and special that will pop up about emptiness. Like, you just go emptiness, it'll sort of come to you. No, you don't learn music or cooking like that. You've got to squeeze your brain, get the recipe, try it out until you get the results. So you've got to have the words. You've got to have the words. So you don't know the definition of emptiness, if you don't know the definition of it, dependent and independent and what dependent means and the relationships and this and cause and parts, you've got to learn all the components, just like you would with music or cooking. You for 30 years people say, oh, I don't know emptiness yet. Well, what are the words? Oh, I don't know. Because we think we're supposed to get an experience without the words, It's just demented. Don't think it's different from learning violin or cooking or killing someone for that matter. The principles are the same. You get the information, you get to facts, you've got to be confident in your facts, and then you begin to think about it. But not just think about it doesn't mean emptiness. Everything's empty. And that's not thinking about it, that's stupid. So you think about it, what is the thinking? What would the thinking sound like? What you think about dependent arising. You don't think about emptiness. You can't. You could say that emptiness is the conclusion you come to having thought about dependent arising. what you conclude is that something is empty. That's the conclusion. That's the insight. Having thought about dependent arising. So what you engage your mind in is dependent arising. His Holiness just now, I was reading one very nice book of His Holiness, a lovely one about emptiness, lots about emptiness, called I forget. It's a very nice one. How to See Yourself as You Really Are. Edited by Jeffrey Hopkins. There's lots of really delicious things in there about emptiness. You know, because we're talking here about this. Okay, let me finish emptiness. Just two kinds of meditation. Okay, before I go on to emptiness again, or we'll go back to whatever. Okay, so meditation. Okay, meditation. So two kinds. First one, concentration. So what that is called calm abiding, okay? Calm abiding, that's the result. So what it is, just speaking loosely, what it is when you've got that, or even heading towards it, you know, is your mind is stable, not chatting all over the place. Even it's described in terms of 9 stages, this process of cultivating calm abiding. So it takes immense mental effort, because we can see our mind at the moment, because of attachment, it's addicted, absolutely addicted to thinking about things, and it's always, you know, it's impelled, propelled by attachment energy. Attachments are wanting this and not wanting that, and wanting this only this and therefore that, and because of this now I'll do this and now I'll do that. So it's dissatisfaction energy, it's the craving energy, it's the thinking about getting something energy, it's the imagining it, it's the manipulating to get it, and the expecting it, and then the sustaining of it. And then of course it crashes down to despair when the bubble bursts because it's not realistic. And the other aspect is always the planning one, the chatting, always about the future. Thinking this in the future, now this and now that, now this, now here, now do that, now that. Never stopping, never stopping, never stopping. That's its nature. You could even say it's the creative aspect of us. Because attachment embellishes things. It's its job. It embellishes what's there. So look at creativity. You can take a simple line or a simple shape or a simple sound, and brilliant artists and musicians can embellish it. That's an aspect of attachment. Combined with intelligence, it makes it useful. Combined with delusion, makes it garbage. It's the nature of the human mind, the deluded mind in this body of ours. So we have to quell that energy, which is intensely difficult. So they say there are 2 main extremes that our mind runs to like a magnet when we sit down to try and meditate, try and focus. Either, you know, they say the 2 main obstacles, they simply refer to it as excitement, which is the chatting energy, the overexcitement, never stopping, you know. You sit down and the mind never stops, that's overexcited. So we try to calm that. But then as soon as we calm it, we go to the other extreme and we fall asleep. They call that dullness. So we almost like the invisible place between these two. We're either wide awake and wound up and all perky and excited in daily life, getting things done, so we can channel that excitement energy and call it action. But you sit down with that excited mind, you bubble up and burst, don't you? Explode. So then you try to calm it down, which is the goal here. But we rush past the point of calm and abiding, and we go to dullness. So there's a big danger here, because many people can sit down very comfortably and sink into a very pleasant, calm feeling, thinking that they're meditating. No, you're not. It's called dullness. It's the cause for stupidity. It's not focus at all. You become like an animal, a very comfy animal. Next life, kind of flop, you're like a cat, you know. It ain't virtue. So like I'm saying, when we just did it one time yesterday, the biggest misconception about this type of meditation, people misconceive it as relaxation. It has got zero to do with relaxation. It takes enormous effort. I remember interviewed when I first worked on Mandela magazine, the FMT magazine in California, my first issue in '95. We interviewed Venerable Rene, our dear Swiss monk friend, who's like a professional meditator. And he described his 18-month, one of his many retreats, at Ursaling, the place of clear light, Lama Yeshe and Milarepa Center in Spain, up in the mountains, where they had little caves. I mean, His Holiness blessed it and called it place of clear light. In 82, he called it that. And he said it reminded of Tibet. These little caves up there, little houses, it's really good for meditation up in the mountains. And he was there for 18 months on this particular retreat. And he said you need incredible effort, mental effort. And why? Because the inertia of the mind just runs to the thinking. We are frantic to grab hold of things to think about, aren't we? We are desperate. Our mind is searching for things to think about. And when we've got them, we're so excited. The food, the this, the mean person, the ugly person, the nice one. All the time thinking, plans, future this. And then the mind, when it's not got that stuff to think about, what does it do? It goes into the emotional dullness of depression. Nothing to look forward to. Nothing is worthwhile. You're like, emotionally, you go into a slump, don't you? So emotionally, the excitement is like the chatting mind, isn't it? And you get things done. It's very productive. And as soon as you sit down, it goes berserk. Or emotionally, I'm just speaking here loosely, the emotional one we have is the depression one. Do you understand? When the mind is just like this inertia, you can't even move your body. So here in meditation, the natural tendency for the mind to be overexcited, attachment energy, we have to learn to calm it. But we have to avoid the danger of going to dullness, which is a really fine point. And as you progress, they say one of the greatest dangers is actually misconstruing this dullness for concentration. So the two main dangers are either overexcited or dull. And we've got to almost like find this invisible spot, is my way of saying it, between these two. And this is an interesting way. This way I find for my own mind helpful. When you've got some semblance of concentration, what you've got is this. If you look at the mind when you're perky and wide awake and wound up and getting things done, there's a sharpness to your mind. There's a real sharpness, isn't there? A clarity to the excited mind, isn't there? So it's like in concentration, you've got to retain the clarity, the sharpness, without the excitement, which is practically impossible, but that's what we have to do. And then you could also say, look when the mind is dull, it's very calm, isn't it? Isn't it?
Yes.
So you've got to keep the calm without the dull, and the sharp without the excitement. That's concentration, and that's a very hard place to go to. Don't underestimate it. Huh?
Is it something like between the breaths?
I don't know about that one. I hear about that one, but what does that mean? I have no idea. I've never heard my lamas talk that one. Mummy, some of your lamas might.
Just the pod, like the...
I don't know about all that, darling. I'm not
Okay.
talking about that here. I'm not even discussing the breath. I've heard that type of talk, and that could be a very helpful technique. But we're not discussing the object of the meditation yet. We're just discussing the general principle of having sharpness and calm. I haven't discussed the object yet. Breath is one example of an object that you learn to focus on, but there's millions of others. But we're not discussing that yet. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's another discussion, That's quite another discussion, that one. Here, I'm trying to convey what concentration is a mind that's sharp but calm, but not excited and not dull. Can you hear that point? That's the point I'm trying to convey. And that's a really tough place to go to. Most of us, and that's why for me when we did this 5-minute sessions with Lama Yeshe, we did a Mahamudra retreat with Lama Yeshe years ago. And I remember he got us to do 5-minute sessions, and it's very sensible because, frankly, many people sit there for 45 minutes, 1 hour, 20 minutes. You're out of your brain. 99% of it, you're spacing out. It's not concentration at all. We don't even know what concentration is. We don't even know the right instructions, Got to be so clear to get the right instructions and know what you're aiming for. Know what you're trying to accomplish. Relax is really important. We're all nuts. We need relaxing. But this is not that. Lie down, much easier. Sit up and cross-legged to relax. It's ridiculous. Lie down. It's a lot better. You understand? So you've got to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And nothing wrong with 3-minute sessions. 3 minutes quality is better than absolutely infinitely superior to 20 minutes spacing out. It's wasting your time. You're becoming an animal. I know I sound extreme all the time. I can't help it. I looked at the elephant thing on YouTube. It was very, not the elephant.
Oh, the lion.
The lion, yes, it was very moving. And I'm a bit rough when I talk. I do know that. I do know animals have a great thing for affection. I'm sorry, Jane. I'm a bit rough. No, it's very good of you to point it out because I'm a bit rough. As lovely as she says sometimes. Trying to convey a certain point and I lose the plot a bit. I get a bit extreme, And I also saw this wonderful one about elephants. These two elephants, two sister elephants, have been separated for 50 years or 30 years, and they both happened to come to the same place. And they recognise each other. There's this fence between them. They bent this metal fence to get there to each other, these sisters. And all the movie afterwards, their trunks entangled, and kissing each other, they're together, hanging out day and night, these two sister elephants. Tears in their lives, you know. But the other one about animals is so interesting. They always love these stories. When you see the lion nurturing the baby mouse or something.
Yeah.
And that's a show. That Buddhist view, that's karma. As karma between people is so strong, it overrides whether you're an elephant or an animal. You've got karma between those two minds, and so they naturally like each other. That's kind of interesting. You see it all the time, like cats liking mice, and you know, it's very wonderful, that one. Karma between people is the strongest. Yeah. So where were we? Concentration, okay. Concentration, which is a necessary technique, and this is these amazing Hindus developed this, and Buddha ran with this one. It's one of his main techniques, and it's necessary in the long term. But the biggest mistake we make is you're a Buddhist if you do your meditation. Excuse me, I've never done those meditations. In 40 years I've never done them. Every now and again I try. I'll lead one, maybe a few minutes. I don't do it. I don't watch my breath. I'm just saying. For the first 7 years, I didn't even sit with my legs crossed. I would have exploded. What a stupid idea. Being a Buddhist is crossing your legs. It's like beyond ridiculous. Closing your eyes and watching your breath as a Buddhist? Thanks a lot. It's a complete bizarre cliche. Being a Buddhist is working on your mind. That I knew I wanted from day one, and I didn't need to cross my legs and close my eyes to do it. You do it while you're washing the dishes, on the toilet, driving the car. You go where you're at. Yes, of course you need concentration eventually. Of course you do, but one step at a time, please. Get your perspective, you know. Everyone's different also. One of my friends, for example, one of the nuns, so she has to sit down and work out her things. Because that's her style. Me, not opposite. I have to stand up and walk and work out my things, you know. Each one's different. Know where you're at and use the tools according to your skills, you know. But this cliche, you're not a Buddhist if you don't watch your breath. I'm sorry, it's just ridiculous. People say, I can't meditate, I'm not a Buddhist. That's pathetic. I can't believe these cliched ideas we have. Being a Buddhist is taking responsibility for your anger, not bad-mouthing your next-door neighbour, you know, shutting up and stop complaining, stop blaming people, stop feeling self-pity. That's being a Buddhist. That we do hard work every day in our daily life. Yes, it does help to sit down quietly in the beginning of the day. And of course, once you become a Buddhist, you take refuge and you have vows and you have commitments, which is great because we never do any practice, we didn't commit to do it. So we have these different commitments, as we call it. So I do my commitments. I don't not do my practice ever, but I might do it with my iPod on, walking around the streets. Much better focus. When I'm driving, I focus really well when I'm driving. If I'm sitting still, my mind goes to all these other things. But if I'm moving, my mind stays calm. It's very peculiar, you know, I've noticed. If I'm on an aeroplane, I can really focus. Because the plane's moving. I feel like something's happening. If I'm driving, I have incredible focus. I have my iPod on with all my prayers on it. I've recited all my prayers and my practices on my little iPod. And I can drive for 6 hours without moving. Because I'm happy because something's moving. But as soon as I'm sitting still, forget it. I don't want to know about that. It's very peculiar. I'm just being personal here, okay? So, you know where you're at. You take the tools that you need. You do what you can. But you get the point. The point of watching your breath is not to be calm. It's a bonus if you are. The point is to give your mind the skill to be able to do the second mode, which is sort out the mess in here. Be your own therapist, you know. That's the point. That's the point. The job is to be your own therapist. And in the long term, you've got to have single point of concentration because the mind at the grosser level is incapable of getting insight into the various things. It's got to go to the longer. Yeah, but slowly, according to your pace. So meanwhile, according to our minds, you know, so you take the teachings, you listen to the teachings, you think about them, you get your head around the terms. You've got to have this. You've got to have the right words. If you can't have the right words, you can't speak. It's completely inappropriate, you know. So at least have the words. And every time you say the words, I mean, this is my job. Lamzoba gave me this job, for whatever reason, back in 1987. I didn't know what to do. I'd left Wisdom Publication. I'd been there for 10 years. I had no idea what I was going to do. But he said to me, I joke about this, it was like Michelangelo, that painting, you know. The memory of it is, he said, go to Sydney and teach. That's how I remember it. Go to Sydney and teach, he said. I was quite shocked. Anyway, whatever. But the point is, I had to speak words, right? Well, I can only speak the words that I'm confident in. Otherwise, I'm really irresponsible, isn't it? But what I find, how fortunate, because I have to study this stuff and edit it, that I've got to think about it. But I notice every time I talk about it, it's my analytical meditation. So thank you very much for humouring me. Every day I talk about it, a little bit gets clearer. I go, oh, that's it. And I'm listening. I go, that's interesting. I say the same words I said yesterday. And I go, oh my God, that's right, isn't it? Do you understand? That's what's called practice, isn't it? Every time you play the violin, you get a bit better at it. Well, speaking to yourself, which is what analytical meditation is, thinking it through logically, that's what words are. So the great benefit for me, thank you, is that I have to speak it out. So hopefully I'm speaking the truth. This from Buddha's perspective. But I'm the beneficiary as well. It's very fortunate, Therefore, you never get bored. Because every time you think it, it goes a bit deeper. Until one day, the penny will drop. It will go from here to here and become your experience. And they say, the first moment of your direct, that's how they call it, non-conceptual perception or insight into emptiness, which is necessarily beyond the gross conceptual. The first direct non-conceptual insight into emptiness. From that second, you make this paradigm shift and you stop being an ordinary being and you become an Arya being or a superior being. You've begun the climb out of samsara towards nirvana and you can't go back. That, Buddha says, is what we've never achieved. When he says we've had all these countless brilliant, amazing lives, we've been high, realized beings, we've had clairvoyance, we've had amazing concentration, we've had blissful experiences, but we've never realized emptiness. So we lost the plot, fell down the mountain, we have to go up again, and get this insight. And once you've got that first non-conceptual, it's the beginning of cutting the root of ignorance, and it can never come back after that. That's what we have to aim for. So for that, you've got to have Singapore to concentration, there's no question. So slowly. But to sit there fiercely working on getting concentration for years and years and years and never listening to the Dharma is you're missing the point completely. I remember hearing one guy who was nearly in tears, who really believed that meditation is just sitting there, and he's waiting for an experience. He was just so distressed after 20 years, and I never have an experience, he said. That's all he's been doing for 20 years, calling himself a Buddhist, waiting for an experience to come. It's like a superstition, I'm sorry. And he was neurotic about it. Or people who are really attached to nice feelings. Like shocking. Remember this one woman in Queensland years ago who began suddenly to do Tara meditation and got extremely blissful. She assumed that was a spiritual experience. She was like a little greedy vampire. She couldn't wait to sit down and think about Tara so she could get good feelings. Lama Zopa said one time one guy in some Vajrasattva retreat was in the corner with his tongue hanging out or something, his mouth open, being blissful. The biggest problem is we think that's spiritual. Nothing to do with it. It's not the point. None of these things. This mystical idea we have in the West about spiritual experiences. A spiritual experience is controlling your anger. A spiritual experience is refraining from bad-mouthing somebody. That's what Buddha means by spiritual. This is bullshit, this other rubbish. Once you have that, if you don't realise giving up attachment to it, then it can be a huge danger. I met many people who, because of these blissful experiences, they don't have any idea about attachment and what it means. They're like vampires for it. They were like greedy vampires. They think they're spiritual. They're hungry ghosts. They're like junkies. It's repulsive, the misunderstanding. Spiritual means giving up delusions. Then you're spiritual. There's a story about always a story they talk about one monk who was a great tantric meditator. And he was attached to his experiences. So he got born as a hungry ghost looking like one of the Buddhas. Yamantaka. So you've got to be so skillful. Practice means giving up delusions. That's the key to success. And if we don't know that, all the rest is like vomit. It's misleading. It can cause nightmares. The number of people who go nuts, who don't understand their mind. There's one fellow in prison, I remember, who was able to have a lot of concentration. He truly believed, he was obsessed with being special. He wrote this long letter to Lama Zopa, in which they just dismissed him. Your practice to help people, he said. Your experiences are nothing. Do 1,000,000 prostrations, Something like that. So we've really got to understand what we're on about. Spiritual practice is giving up delusions and growing virtues. That's it. And naturally, when the mind gets less deluded, more virtuous, the bonus is you'll have nice feelings. That's all. The bonus. It's just a nice result, you know. And that reminds me, I want to talk about... quarter to 10, okay, we're fine. So, okay, concentration. All right, so we understand a bit about meditation. Do you have any questions about meditation? Any kind? It's helpful to ask questions because then we can see what our misconceptions are.
I guess as you were talking about analytical meditation, and I guess in my mind I was thinking about making like a hypothesis in a scientific scenario.
That's right.
And
That's
so,
what you're
so
doing.
you make a hypothesis,
Yeah.
and then your
Then you start
method,
to-
you have a
Yeah,
method to
precisely,
analyze
precisely.
that.
That's
and
exactly
then
what
you're
you're
coming
doing.
to a conclusion
That's exactly
in your
what you're doing.
meditation. Is that
Precisely.
correct?
That's
The way I
exactly what it
interpreted
is.
what you said?
That's exactly what you're doing.
Okay. Just want to clarify.
I mean, there's many approaches. You know, there's very formal ways of doing it. If you look at the very traditional formal way of doing this analysis, it's quite sophisticated. And the demands concentration already, and demands quite an understanding of the use of logic, which is what they get in their debates in the monasteries.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't got that particular level. We have to learn that kind of logic, and that means so even a simple way of applying this idea, you know, is dealing with your miseries, dealing with your problems. So say you have a fight with your hubby or whatever you've got at home, you know. You have one of them, do you?
Yes.
Okay, good. So let's say you have a fight with your hubby. We all know the stress of that. It's too painful, isn't it? And there's a stress and you're raging, the mind's raging on, he's this and he's that, and it's not fair, and you kind of know your own guilty business, you don't want to know about it, you blame him, blah, blah, blah. So you sort of shut up and you sit down and you try to hear the story that's going on. It's quite an elaborate story that's happening. It's quite a fierce argument going on in your head, isn't it? So of course the Buddha's saying it's all based on a series of ridiculous misconceptions. So you've got to try and see, even one approach, for example, if you look at the way that we're talking here, the hierarchy of the delusions. There's the ego grasping, which clings to the self, which is the root. On the basis of this is this craving to get what it wants every second. On the basis of this, there's aversion when it doesn't get it. Just these three alone. So then, obviously, the fight with somebody means they said or did things that your attachment didn't want, isn't it? So then that's why we have aversion, which is called upset, isn't it? So then you have to, so one approach is you listen to what anger's saying. How dare he do that? It is not true. I did not do that. He said this, blah, blah. You say, shut up, girl. And you say, well, let's look at what anger's saying and look at the assumption it's based on. And this is one approach. The assumption it's based on is that my attachment is the problem. Anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So you go beyond the anger and you listen to what attachment wants. And what it wants is what it wants. What it wants is what the fantasy I wants. So depending on what your level is, you can look at the anger and argue with it. Or you can go to the deeper level and look at simply the response because my attachment, which is this weird little tongue of junkie in there, who didn't get what she wanted every second. And then you can even look more deep and look at emptiness if you want to go to the I one. So depending on which one you attack. Do you understand what I'm saying? And or there's so many ways, and the more you study the teachings, the more tools you obviously have to do the arguing, isn't it? And the deeper one, of course, is like using more the assumption, the hypothesis one, like emptiness and things. The only way you can think about it, dependent arising, one of the key arguments. If you don't know any words, you can't think about it. That's the point. We don't get that. Then we think about analytical meditation. We don't know what it is. What am I supposed to analyse? We blah, blah. We read all the books, Well, perfect human rebirth. All right, perfect human rebirth. But if we don't know it naturally in here, we'll never get it. So the more you study, the more the words make sense, the more you have the recipes, the more you've got to think about. And it's then delicious thinking. Do you understand? You enjoy it. And you're basically using wisdom to argue with ego's misconceptions to whatever degree you can. Have a little weep. It's all right, But then, shut up, Robina. So sometimes you're sort of shut up, back off, stop the story. Other times you have to go into the story. It depends, what you need to do at different times. Do you understand? So, okay. Then, of course, in Tantra, you have these other types of meditations which are called visualization. Well, I mean, that too we're totally familiar with. We all say, oh, I haven't got any concentration. Oh, I can't visualize. That's an absolute load of rubbish. Just remember the last time you were angry with somebody. There you were sitting, you might have been in the football field. You might have been in the traffic on the freeway. You don't say, be quiet everybody, I'm trying to concentrate on anger. You can single-pointedly concentrate on anger. The world can be exploding around you. You will never get distracted. We have perfect attachment. I mean, perfect concentration when it comes to attachment and anger. If you're in, I remember being in, oh, this is too much information. I remember being in love with people. With the total fantasies. So we have perfect visualization skills, the most elaborate, you can write novels in your head when you're in love with somebody. The details of your fantasies are beyond belief. And with single point of concentration, right? Okay, not too much information, it's okay. You see what I'm saying? You don't need to go away, I'm trying to fantasize, you're disturbing me. You don't care. You're so focused because you're so hungry for that delicious story in your head. That's visualization. It's called creative imagination, and that's concentration. So we have got it. It's just that it's boring to think about virtue. Who wants to think about virtue? That's why we can't do it. It's too boring, you know. So don't say you haven't got the skills. We have. We're geniuses at it. Just have to change the object, that's all. And the tantric meditations, speaking simply, like we did this morning, is from Tantra, where you visualize the Buddha. I mean, it's a very delicious way, actually. These practices, the way we simply did it this morning, with no prayers or anything, just the visualizing, is very, very powerful for our mind. So in the Lam Rim, you've got your hands in your you-know-what. It's like garbage. You're dealing with your dramas and your negativity and your misery, you know, trying to sort it out. That's hard work. So you give yourself a break sometimes and visualize Tara. And relax. And what you're doing in these practices, in this beginning one, you're getting rid of all the weeds. But in this one, you're visualizing the end result, they say, the perfect result. It's like positive. It's the ultimate in positive thinking. You're seeing yourself winning that gold medal, you know. You're visualizing perfectly the end result. And you're bringing, as they say in Tantra, you're bringing the end result into the present. So it's a super powerful cause for exactly that. It's not just fantasizing, because we think the mind doesn't matter in the West. We think it's just in the mind, it doesn't matter. So we think this is useless stuff. But remember, the Buddha says every thought counts. So visualizing yourself purifying, visualizing becoming Tara, visualizing benefiting others, that's the entire path to enlightenment in 20 minutes. Inconceivable virtue. Blissful. Don't discount it, you know, because every thought counts. Do you understand? But it's using the same principles, concentration and analysis, except the analysis here is the sort of more visualizing, you know, but it's the same, it's using discursive mind and then focusing. And you'd use this also for your concentration meditation. In the Tibetan tradition, the object for getting concentration is the deity, for example, not your breath. Because the breath is very gross. The breath is not going to last you long, because it's got to be an internal object, like a visualization or emptiness itself, because you can have that at a subtler level. But breath is a physical thing, and at some point when you meditate, that'll stop. So it's just the beginning to use the breath. It's helpful, because you easily can anchor your mind to it. Are you with me, people? Okay. So the other thing I want to really tell you, it's a very interesting one, this one, it's a bit depressing to us, but it's really helpful to understand, you know, is the contents of the mind. A bit more about the contents of the mind. Buddhist model of the mind, the psychological model, the contents of the mind. So like I said, you know, you've got three categories, negative, positive, and neutral. The neutral, all these kind of the mechanical bits, I call them that. We're talking thoughts, you know, but they're kind of intention, attention, concentration, mindfulness, alertness. There's many of these that all play a role every second in doing whatever we do, whether it's virtuous or non-virtuous. That's why they're called neutral. They're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous, but they're crucial to do virtuous or non-virtuous things. As Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. Mindfulness is used in a very gross way in the West, a very broad way. Technically, it's one mental factor, as they call it, we would say state of mind, one of the many mental factors, and its specific function is to not forget what you're doing. That's the meaning of it. It's better to be calling it not forgetfulness. Lama Yeshe would call it memory. Not forgetting what you're doing. It doesn't mean looking into the past, remembering all your experiences. No. As you're doing something, you know that if you forget what you're doing, you're in big trouble. Like you walk out the door, and, oh, what was I doing? That's not forgetfulness. That's no mindfulness. The way we use it is like a big stick, you know, be mindful, Robina. Like that, you know. It's wicked, ridiculous, nonsense, religious, fundamentalist. It's not forgetfulness, that's all. So Lama Zopa says these need it. Obvious, everyone needs it. So one of the really important ones is the word called feeling. There's a group, there's a group, the text on the mind called Lorig takes, selects 51 of what basically are thousands of different mental factors. States of mind, we would call them. And this is coming again from the Hindus. This has been the basis of the text that's studied today in the Tibetan monastic university system about the mind is coming from these Hindus. They're the ones who came up with this marvellous observation from their own concentration of the way the mind works, the conceptuality, the cognition, the way the mind works. It's phenomenal and stunning, delicious, so and quite difficult to comprehend. Quite subtle, the points of it all. But the psychological model, they took 51 of the many thousands of states of mind for the ones that are particularly important to understand in order to practice virtue, to meditate and practice virtue. So there's different groupings in those 51. And one grouping is called the 5 always present mental factors, which means every millisecond that you're functioning as an ordinary person, a good or bad one, if these are all working, you'll do your job well, whether it's being a sniper or a meditator. So the first one of these is called intention, which is the meaning of karma, the very beginning of the entire process. Intention means I will. It's the start. As Rinpoche says, everything exists on the tip of the wish. And that's what it means, intention, I will. First one. Then you pay attention, you home in and you pay attention to whatever that was. Then they say there's the next one that's called, what is it? Intention, attention. Is contact one of those 5?
Yeah.
Or discrimination, feeling, and contact must be which one was order. Never mind. The 2 I want to talk about.
They're simultaneous. They're ever present, right?
That's right. Are they always present
So they're
ones?
simultaneous.
There are contacts in those. The 5, is it? I can't remember. But I don't care about that one. The ones I'm talking here are this. You see, when you hear about this thing called the 5 aggregates, what happened to the lady in the chair? There she is. That's you.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering where you were, but you're there.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. You can sit still. You can relax. Let's look at it back in. Okay. In the thing that's called the 5 aggregates, which is one sutra of the Buddha's where he describes a person and he divides us up into 5 bits. They call them the 5 aggregates. I mean, who uses that word in their daily life? God knows, But 5 bits, There are thousands of bits. We can see that, but we can divide into 5. And the first one is called form, which is referring to the physical part. The second 2 are the interesting ones. They're 2 of these 51 mental factors. He plucks them out and gives them special importance because of the incredible role they play in following attachment, which keeps samsara going. And they're called feeling, and discrimination. They're 2 of and they are 2 also of these 5 always present mental factors. So discrimination is a totally vital state of mind. It's this ability to distinguish every millisecond between this and that. And you know very well, you can't tell the black from the pink, the white, the square from the round. You have lost the plot, period. That's what happens when you get old. These bits fall away. You no longer can tell one thing from another. That's called discrimination, and that's a crucial one. So this is what plays the role every millisecond in terms of attachment, but certainly in terms of virtue. You have to learn to discriminate between non-virtue and virtue. You have to have the discrimination in the mind that can distinguish between all the different thoughts, which is a super difficult job because there's millions of thoughts a second. This is the main use of this discrimination, to know this thought and that thought, there's this and that one, this one saying that one. It's like that, super subtle. But the one after this is called feeling, and this is really interesting. Feeling. Not used the way we think of it, as an equivalent of an emotion, Not like that. We have only 3 kinds of feelings, and we have any kind of these every millisecond. You have either a pleasant feeling, an unpleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling. Well, let's forget the neutral, okay? Look at pleasant and unpleasant. This is absolutely fundamental to our lives. Another word for pleasant is called happiness. It's an equivalent word, happy feelings, happiness. Unpleasant feeling is suffering. happiness and suffering. One way of even describing all of Buddha's deal is on the basis of every sentient being wants happiness and doesn't want suffering. It's used as a basis even of much of one's practice even. The goal is to stop suffering and get happy. His methods lead us to that. So here, what we have to understand, this is what we have to understand how samsara works. And when we understand how we misunderstand this and mix it with attachment, then we can understand how we suffer. So let me give you an example. I always like to use this example of this little boy, son of a friend of mine, who was a fisherman. From the time he could remember, as soon as he saw fishing, he fell in love with fishing. So let's look at this and analyse it from the point of view of karma and the delusions. And therefore understand feeling, the function of feeling. So there's this person. We can deduce from his, from the way karma works, that he's been in the lower realms in the past as a result of killing. That karma has exhausted itself. And then marvellously, a virtuous karmic seed was triggered before one of his deaths. That caused him to run to this nice mummy's womb in California. Jess, her name was. So he got a human birth. He got a good human birth. So that means he had the next type of karma, he had lots of good tendencies. He was kind, intelligent, loving, generous. But he had one tendency among the others, which was a tendency to kill, which basically is the residual result of the previous complete result of killing, which is having been in the lower realms. And the point is this: because he hadn't purified his tendency to kill by living in vows of not killing and by purifying every night and reiterating his vow to never kill again, for this reason he's born into this life, a good life, with a tendency to kill. Now, look at the human world. I'd say most humans kill something, and most religions say it's cool, isn't it? I mean, this is the course of the lower realms, right there. Right there. The killing. And it's habit, instinctual. And so we don't even think about it, because we practiced it to perfection in the past. This is the one that's most tragic. So there's this beautiful boy, intelligent, kind, loving, generous. Then he's got good experiences, the next lot of karma. Really good mummy, good daddy, good family, good environmental, bucket loads of good karmas. Lots of wonderful experiences due to his past virtue. But his one karma was to kill. So he had a tendency to kill fish. So fish is considered cool to kill in our culture, pretty much, isn't it, still? So then what happened was, this is the point I'm getting to. There he was, a little boy, I forget, 5 or something. And he meets fishing for the first time. Well, it's like he fell in love with fishing. I always think of Romeo and Juliet in West Side Story. Tony and Maria, remember? I just saw it on my iPad lately. I bought it recently. I love Jerome Robbins and stuff, So they are singing, in the party, the Jets and the Sharks at the dance, and all of a sudden they see each other. Everything else goes. All they see is each other. That's karma ripening. Same with enemies. You met that monster, you can't believe, you never thought of him before, and look at him now. That's how karma ripens between people. Well, it's like the same with him. He fell in love with fishing. Literally, it's like he fell in love. What that means is the karmic seed was there. He didn't know it was there. The seeing of the condition called fishing triggered the ripening of that karmic impression in his mind, the tendency. Then this is the point. What it instantaneously triggers is attachment. No, well, I don't know which one's first. Maybe it's feeling. Okay, so what is triggered instantaneously is a good feeling, a pleasant feeling. Because he's done it in the past, so attachment has to be coming at the same time, I think. I'm not quite sure the evolution. Because attachment is this hunger to always get the nice thing. So suddenly this fishing comes. It has to be attachment rises first instantaneously. The karmic imprint ripens. The attachment ripens that causes it to look divine. That's why it looked divine. That's why it looked divine. He has a strong habit to do it from the past. So that he's got this familiarity with it. So the attachment instantaneously rises and makes it look divine. And also what attachment does, this is the tragedy, attachment triggers a really good feeling in the body. As simple as that. So the logical deduction, is it not, of that person, you can't believe this delicious looking thing. Attachment makes it look divine. It makes it look divine. And extremely, the more divine it is, the stronger the karma, the more the blissful feelings. So obviously the deduction is we want good feelings every millisecond. We're junkies for good feelings. That's what attachment causes. You get the good feelings. So naturally, because the fishing looks good, you deduce it must be good. So you got to do it again because you want more good feelings. That's why it's hard to change our habits. Look at our pathetic habits. Eating too much food, you know. Forget killing fish. Feeling is the ripening at that moment of extremely good feelings in his body, very simple, in his mind, in his body, which triggers the body, triggers the wind energies to make nice feelings in the body. And we're junkies for good feelings. So we all know in our lives, whatever causes out there, what triggers a good feeling, it has to be good, we want to do it again. So it's something that's naughty, like if he had attachment to killing poodles, he would have been in trouble. He'd have to sneak around at night, wouldn't he? Sneaking out at night, going around getting the poodles, killing them no one catches him, because he'd be put in prison if he killed a poodle. But fish, he could do it in the open, no problems. So it'd be quite tension for him, wouldn't it? So all these torturers, all these pedophiles, they've got to sneak around doing it in private because they know they'll get caught. So it causes great tension because they can't stop their deep habit. From past karma, you have the habit. It triggers good feelings and it makes the thing look good. I remember reading all these long stories about this serial killer called, remember BTK? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's 30 years ago, 20 years ago? Mm-hmm. Bind, torture, kill, he called himself. And it's about 30 years he was, was secret, catching people, families, couples, and have this whole scenario in his own house and all this elaborate drama that he would present of torturing them, binding them, torturing them, and he got his sexual orgasms from it. So sexual orgasm just means very good feelings, that's all. There's nothing special, because these things stood up, who cares? It's a very good feeling, that's all. And so what we call sexual is a special trip over there. It just means very good feelings, that's all. And bodies happen to trigger us in us, any kind of old body. Are we communicating here? Yes. So for him it was fishing. For him it was torture. For someone else it's like bodies, For someone else it's stealing. Someone else it's food. Maybe not such good feelings with food. Got to work hard at it. But basically we're junkies, you see, and that's what attachment is. So attachment is to the object that appears good to us because of the familiarity with it, which then triggers good feelings in the body. And that's what we call happiness. And this is how come we're in samsara. Because the things that make good feelings are the things that attachment wants, And then it ends up causing us to be greedy vampires and to harm others. But this is the extra point that's heartbreaking. We hear the Buddha say that virtue is the cause of happiness or good feelings. And non-virtue is the cause of unhappy feelings or unpleasant feelings. And he means it literally. So you can count in your day, if you track your day internally, not externally. Like, how'd you go today, Robina? Oh, really well. What happened? Well, the red light was here, and this is what happened, and the husband shouted at me. So lots of bad feelings all day, but you track it externally. Well, track it internally. You have a little graph, You wake up in the morning, you have pleasant feelings, very pleasant, very, very, very pleasant feelings, but really unpleasant, pleasant, mild, mild. Are you sort of with me? And if you look to the outside, the pleasant feelings come when you get what you want, and the unpleasant feelings come when you don't. This is samsara, right? We usually go by the outside. So, if we're tracking on the inside, every millisecond of good feeling that you have is not caused directly by the food, the fishing, the torture, the kiss. No, that's merely a catalyst. The actual main cause of that good feeling is a past virtuous action, which is leaving a seed in your bank vault of virtues. And every time one of those ticks up, it triggers a good feeling. But the tragedy is, we think the killing of fish is the cause of good feelings. No, your past virtue is. So basically, your PISSING, your good feeling, your past virtue down the toilet. By thinking it's fishing that causes it, so you keep doing more fishing. You keep harming sentient beings in order to trigger good feelings. We keep eating more cake in order to trigger good feelings. We keep jumping on the next person in order to trigger good feelings. We keep saying the mean words in order to trigger good feelings. It's a tragedy. Are we communicating here? Good feelings are the fruit of virtue, which is good in itself, but we just completely destroy them, misuse them. Waste them. Because we assume that the fishing is the cause. But it's just a trigger, that's all. That's the tragedy. Or it's the cake, the fishing, the sex, the object of the senses. So that causes attachment to be more like a vampire, to grasp it more and feed ourselves, to cause attachment, which causes us to have suffering in the future. So we're using our virtue up to create non-virtue, which sends us to the hell realms and the lower realms and the and more suffering in the future. That's the tragedy of it. And so this one of samsara is a technical thing, not like a judgment moralistic thing.
I don't have this right in my head, so I'm trying to figure it out. Attachment gives you a sense of a good feeling, or that you're going to
Attachment literally, okay, using the Vajrayana model, it's very helpful. The explanation of a physical a person, an embodied person. You have a consciousness and you have a body. So the consciousness, the way they talk it in the Vajrayana model, it's the same model they use in the Tibetan medical system, which is similar to the Chinese one. You've got all this subtle nervous system. And these subtle wind energies are coursing through all that nervous system. And the states of mind are connected to those wind energies. They say the mind rides on the wind. So the mind of attachment, which is this overexcited energy, it mixed with its winds, it triggers a good feeling. It is the cause of a good feeling in the body. Attachment triggers a good feeling. The good feeling is a result of virtue, but it triggers one of those in the mind. And on the basis of the body as well, because we're embodied. So we think the cake is the direct cause of the good feeling. But it's just a trigger.
So it's like psyching out our good virtue? It's using up good virtue?
Yeah, totally, I have to say, pissing it down the toilet.
Okay,
Excuse me. Yes, that's the tragedy of samsara.
okay.
So to hear this first and then to try and go against it is mightily difficult, because we're all junkies, you know. We're all junkies. And this is the point about what Buddha says, the suffering of change is the second kind of suffering, which is really what we call happiness. And it's the suffering of change, because it's true that when you put the cake in the mouth, it does trigger a good feeling. It's not an argument. Buddha's not saying it's not a good feeling. It is a good feeling. But the other point he makes is, first it's wasting your virtue, because you'll only have a good feeling if you've got any virtue in your tank. If you've got no virtuous seeds in your tank, you can eat cake till the cows come home. You won't ever feel a good feeling. That's a really important point. If you don't have any virtuous seeds in your tank, in your petrol tank, you can keep eating cake and it'll never trigger a good feeling. You can have sex till the cows come home. You just won't have a good feeling. You will kill fish, do what you like. You'll never find anything to make you feel happy. Some people are like that. That's because you can't access your virtuous seeds. Or you could argue, if that fisherman got migraines every day, all he is experiencing now is the fruits of his negative karmic seeds and his negative bank vault. So even if he went fishing, he couldn't enjoy it. He couldn't get any good feelings. There's no space, because all he's doing is bad feelings because of his headache. Isn't it? You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. There was something else I wanted to say, but I lost the plot. Are we communicating here?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, okay, yeah. So Buddha's saying, it is a good feeling, there's no question. That what the torturer gets is a good feeling. You can't say it's not a good feeling. It's simply that. And don't confuse it with attachment. Attachment is a delusion in the mind, and a good feeling is simply a good feeling. They're separate things. They're separate phenomena. But one triggers the other, and we practically don't distinguish between them. But the trouble is, Buddha says, first of all, the good feelings you experience on the basis of cake, not to mention killing, are contaminated, he says. Are contaminated. So they're kind of destroyed, used up, wasted. And it's not nearly as nice. The pleasure's kind of polluted pleasure. So the thing is, this is Buddha's point. It's very interesting. You know, right now we can say, can't we, the only way we know how to trigger a good feeling is to get some object of the senses. Or to get, even more precise, an object of attachment. A person praising me, a person liking me, a person giving me something, a nice cake, a nice body, a nice handbag, a nice sleep. Totally attachment drives us every millisecond in these bodies of attachment. We are like junkies, born in the body of a junkie that is forced to ingest junk just to survive. That's what being in samsara is. So it takes a while to interpret this without moralistic, without drama, without guilt, without shame, but technically to understand the process, you know. So Buddha's saying, hey guys, I've got a method for you to get happiness without having to bother with boring old sense objects. Of course, that sounds very boring to us because we want all the fuss and bother. We want all the puffing and panting, don't we? You understand? He says, guess what, folks? You think happiness, good feelings, are the result of getting what attachment wants. Mistake. Good feelings, happiness, he says, are the result of giving up attachment. That's it. That's his method. Simple. Not complicated. Just difficult. Because why? Because he has found that the natural state of our mind, our consciousness, the natural state of our consciousness, when it's unencumbered by the junkie mind and therefore all the other delusions, just naturally is bliss. Happiness that literally doesn't change into suffering. So he calls the happiness we have now the suffering of change, because there is pleasure when you eat the cake. But we all know that the more you eat the cake, the more disgusting it becomes. You have that. You have the best sex in the universe. You keep having it until you're exhausted. It'll become disgusting. Think of any action you do. That fisherman out there blissing out to keep killing fish 24 hours a day, 36 hours, 48 hours. He would die of exhaustion and he'd be repulsed by killing. So, as Buddha's saying, very simply, very logically, if cake, killing, sex, food, music is the cause, validly, of happiness, the more you do it, the happier you'll get. It's blatantly not true. Anybody with half a brain can prove it. We can't bear to, because we're junkies. So his method is to get rid of attachment, get rid of the delusions, and what you're left with naturally is bliss. I remember Venerable Rene, in the interview I did with him in 95, he talked about his single point of concentration retreat in Spain, like 18 months he was there, and he said he just maybe touched upon the 5th of the 9 stages of concentration. And he said something like this. He said that the joy or the pleasure, I forget the words, that he experienced in his meditation at the 5th of the 9, not all the way to the subtlest, was infinitely superior to any pleasure he'd ever experienced through his senses. So meaning, when you do concentration meditation, this Hindu's technique, as you subdue the delusions, you subdue the neuroses, you just naturally experience the bliss of your own natural mind. It's natural. Are we communicating? It's not a way to go, it's hard work. We need to understand the logic of it all, the technicalities of it. It's not emotional, it's not fundamentalist, it's not punishment, it's not reward, which is how we hear all this stuff. It's so heavy, It's technical. Okay, any questions? 10:20. We've got to make a plan today. I mean, supposed to have lunch. Actually, I discovered that lunch was really at 12:30, but we never realised, did we? So we've been having it at noon. Doesn't matter. But today, I imagine we can be finished by 12 or 12:30. But just in case we're not, does anybody have to go by a certain time today? Nobody. Okay. So if we go till 1 o'clock, it's okay with you if we need to? We might need to. Okay. Huh? It's okay. All right. So, you want tea break? Have a tea break. See you soon.